You got your Mac and Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald here with on Birds 365. It is an undefeated Tuesday. I'm going to say that every day until the Eagles lose again. If the Eagles lose again. Here on Birds 365. Good to have you back, Johnny Mac.
Was that our first intimation towards 17-0? Was that the first one?
Yeah, kind of offhanded. Didn't even think of it that way. I'm just calling it undefeated Tuesday. They didn't make you fly to Seattle to get back to Philadelphia from Los Angeles?
No, straight through. As good as it can be, but you know, when you're on a plane for 6 hours out, a little bit less coming back. But
hey, if it's nonstop, that's good. You take it any way you can get it.
Yeah.
Even if they're flying slow, that's okay. Better than stopping, getting off 2 hours, paying for overpriced airport food, having to wait for the next flight. Yeah, no.
That's one of the biggest scandals in the you know, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, but you know, we're trying to lighten things up here. But yeah, I mean, they hold you hostage in airports, and boy, man, yeah, those prices, those are ballpark prices, maybe times 2.
Yeah, when I went to the Philly game last week, and I'm going again tomorrow, I didn't realize how much a 12-ounce beer was these days. It's been a while since I actually paid for one.
How much is it? Because it's got to be way over $10, right?
Yeah. My daughter got one of those like combination fruit juice drinks, whatever. I don't even know what the hell they are, but hers was probably only 10 ounces and mine was 12 ounces cans. Was over $30 for drinks.
Yeah, that's amazing.
30 and change.
By the way, hat tip to the Los Angeles Rams because they now join the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, they gave us some cocktails after the game. So
really?
After I was done the post-game show with the boys, I got to have a Bud Light in the press box as I sat down for 3 more hours.
They're pouring out little barley and hops, huh? That's not too shabby.
Not bad.
Good on the Hollywood Rams. All right, and good for the Philadelphia Eagles to go to the Hollywood Rams. They win again. They're 5-0. A lot of good things happened in the game. They did a lot of good things. Once again, imperfect, and we'll nitpick a couple of the things that they need to, as players like to say these days, clean up. Always good to get a little cleanup in, and it's easier to clean up after a win than it is after a loss, and that's where the Eagles are exactly at. Comparing this win to their 4 other wins, John McMullen, best, one of the best, it's another game. How did you overall evaluate the Eagles from opening kick to final gun in their victory over the Rams?
Boy, that's an interesting question. Where would I rate? I see. You know what I rate it? A typical Eagles game, man. They just wore them down.
It's another 2023 Eagles game. Very similar.
I mean, man, at halftime I was thinking, all right, this is going to be a problem because they can't deal with Cooper Kupp, and the slot is this big issue, and they come out in the second half and they just wear people down. And I think it was Jalen Carter's sack on Matthew Stafford where it was the violent sack where Matthew Stafford was wanting a flag. And it was almost like, all right, I'm done. I'm done with this pass rush. And there were a couple times when you're there live, you can see Kupp had people beat downfield for big gains, and Matthew Stafford was just hurried and bad throws over the wrong shoulder, just not putting, and this is an accurate quarterback typically, but he was very uncomfortable. And at the third quarter, I have this giant scoreboard at SoFi Stadium. They had put up at the time, Matthew Stafford was getting the football out in 2.2 something seconds. I mean, he was not comfortable. And I think that really helped the secondary. And they completely shut him down. I mean, they had like 80, just over 80 yards in the second half. I mean, it was a dominant performance. And then offensively, their people are going to complain about the red zone, and I get it. 2 of 6, and Nick said after the game 2 of 5 because they were just running out the clock at the end. Even that's not good enough. But they were in the red zone 6 times. The Rams were in the red zone once, 6 times, 454 yards again. They've been over 415 for 4 consecutive games. They've only done that 5 times in their history, Jody. And they did it last year, and now they've done it this year. I mean, this team is good. And all we can do is nitpick because they're just better than everybody else.
Than everybody they've played.
They're on paper, they're better. I mean, San Francisco's in the conversation, obviously, and people are going to say because they style pointed better. And I have no problem with people saying they're the better team and Kansas City in the Super Bowl. But I continue to say they outplayed them. They just made mistakes. No, I think they're better than everybody else. And I wish I didn't because it's more interesting to me when there's problems. They're so stinking good. And I'm sitting there. I'm telling you, Jody, at halftime, I'm like, all right, the Rams might sneak this game out. And then they just put their foot on their throat. And they do that each and every week. And we constantly talk about, where are we? 22 of 23, I think. 22 of 23 with Jalen Hurts as a starting quarterback. I mean, I'm not a win-loss guy as a starting quarterback until it gets to that point. Like when you keep winning every single week in this league where everybody has these crappy games this year, with the exception of the Eagles, and they've had some crappy in San Francisco, but they'll have crappy games. And nobody's going 17-0, and I don't expect the Eagles to go 17-0. But they're just good. They're just really, really good.
They are undefeated, and we're down to just 2, and it's been that way for a couple weeks. And it's them in San Francisco, and yeah, San Francisco has had more style points. And in truth, style points are meaningless. They're important in college football. They mean nothing in the NFL. The standings are the only thing that matters. So if you want to say the Eagles are tied for being the best team in the National Football League, I agree with you. They are. They're 2 undefeated team. It's them and San Francisco, 1 and 1A. Put them in whatever order you want. If you do want to go a little further inside, I think you have to say San Francisco has been more impressive to this point, plain and simple. They haven't had games that you can pick apart like we pick apart the Eagles. But that, again, becomes irrelevant because they're going to play. At some point, they're going to play. San Francisco's going to come here in December. I said this last night on WIP. I would bet good money that when they come to when San Francisco comes to Philadelphia, the most that these two teams will be separated is one game. That either the Eagles will be 11-1 and the 49ers will be 10-2, or the 49ers will be 11-1 and the Eagles will be 10-2, or they'll both be 12-0, whatever the amount of games they played before that is. And whoever wins that game is going to have a massive edge in who's getting home field in the playoffs. Because if there's only one game difference, then the 49ers game behind the Eagles, they win that game. They're even with the Eagles to get the tiebreaker because they got that game, and vice versa. So whoever wins that game in December, I know it's way off, but it is going to be the game of the season. It will be at that point, and I bet good money when the season's over, it will still be the game. We keep changing. Last week it was Buffalo, Miami. Oh, the game of the year. Until this week, when it was the 49ers and the Cowboys. Oh, the game of the year. And we'll continue to do this up until the 49ers and the Eagles. And then when that game is played, it'll be the game of the year that week, and it'll probably be the game of the year at the end of the week. But they're the 2 undefeated teams, and yeah, off a 42-10 win over the Cowboys, I think got to put the Niners 1 and the Eagles 2. But again, doesn't matter. It'll be decided by these 2 teams on the field, and that's what happened in Sunday. Was decided against the Rams, and that defensive effort you pointed out was tremendous, and as they just shut down the Rams. Brandon Graham said it after the game. I've talked to some guy. You talk to guys much more than I do, but some guys that I've talked to both on air and off air have said halftime adjustments is one of the biggest overrated things in the National Football League.
It's
they go in,
overrated.
They eat some oranges. The coaches give them a little bit of a pep talk. They talk to each other, and they go back out on the field.
Yeah.
People think like the coach is there and he's writing stuff down on the board. Here's what we do different. We got to do that. There's very little of that actually goes on in the National Football League. But even if it's just one or two small things, it's considered an adjustment, and it should be. Whatever the hell they did, that was phenomenal, because they were getting gutted pretty good in the first half. Both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua were running wild and open in that secondary. And you mentioned the upgrade in the passing department, that they just made it that much more difficult for Matthew Stafford. But they also, I think, shut it down in the secondary. I think they played better coverage. Were you as surprised as I was that Bradley Roby was not only activated, but played as much as he did? Damn, did they get him up to speed fast?
No, well, I was kind of alerted to that on Friday, that he was going to play, but they were going to have him on a pitch count, which was, I think a little bit of desperation, to be honest, because they were aware that Kupp was going to play. And boy, he was healthy, and boy, he is good, Jody, man. It is, I can't say enough good things about Cooper Kupp. I mean, the separation he gets just from, and from inside usually, is unbelievable. It's something to see live. And they really, and understandably, they really struggled early. And they tried Goodrich first, then they tried Eli Ricks, and it was bad. And, then they kind of went to Roby. Now, that was the plan coming in. I asked Nick that they were going to rotate all the guys, but clearly Roby's going to be the guy. They just, when he's in football shape completely, and he already is, but, he's going to be the slot corner moving forward. Or it's going to be somebody from outside the organization if he fails. And he was better. And he was better than those guys because he knows how to play. He's been playing a long time, and he knows how to play. And he slowed things down a little bit, but I blame Sean McVay a little bit from getting away from it, which I don't understand. And that's a bright offensive mind. Arguably, a lot of people in this league would say the offensive mind. They joke around the league. You had a cup of coffee with him a couple of years ago, you get a head coaching interview. Some of these coaches are strange, and that's what I give the Eagles credit for. When you're not stopping something, they're not going to stop doing it.
Shouldn't.
No, to me, it's common sense. And the Eagles weren't stopping the slot stuff, and they just stopped doing it. And it was a little bit weird to me. And you get these, scripted group of plays at the beginning of games. And then when you get off that, you see it all around the league. Guys get very redundant. In McVay's case, I think he wasn't redundant enough. I mean, if they can't stop it, don't stop doing it. So I think he helped. And then I think the pass rush really helped. I mean, Jalen Carter, I don't know what to say anymore, Jody. I'm so disgusted at the rest of this league. If you go back to 2022, when Trayvon Walker was the number 1 overall pick, and it should have been Aiden Hutchinson in hindsight, but even Aiden Hutchinson, who's a great player, I'm not even talking. He's a level above those guys. He is so clear and beyond everybody else in that stinking draft. And I get it. I get the off the field stuff. But again, I've said this 100 times. He made mistakes due to immaturity. He wasn't Robin Banks. He wasn't Al Capone. He wasn't this nefarious human being. He was just an immature kid, and people were scared off, and they handed maybe a generational player to the best roster in football. The whole league should be disgusted at themselves. He is unbelievable. And he is unblockable. And, you know, if you look at Hassan Reddick closing the game with the 2 sacks, the 1 sack, look at it. He's bowling over 2 people. Even when he's not making the play, he's impacting the play. This is Fletcher Cox is one of the best defensive players in this organization's history. No, I'm not. It's very early, but this guy's got a chance to be way above that. The Eagles lost. I'll say one last thing. The Eagles lost one of the best pass rushing defensive tackles in football, who's doing a great job in San Francisco, by the way. And we don't even talk about it because it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because they got better. They got better. And it was handed to them on a platter.
It's unbelievable. It's a term that's used more often in basketball than it is in football. It's used in both, but I think of it more as a basketball descriptive term than it is in football. But first step quickness. He is so quick. And we talk about it, and if you get your hands on the film and you got the ability, you can zero in on it. Lane Johnson beats the snap. It's not like Lane Johnson is this unbelievably quick, fast, athletic for his size guy. He is just so well-trained and so smart. He gets that millisecond of a head start ahead of time. And between you and I, a lot of times it could be called a penalty. And they just don't. It's so, he is perfected leaving at the exact time he's supposed to leave. Jalen Carter doesn't even need that. He waits till the ball is snapped, and then he just outquicks the guy who's standing there in front of him, who he's just as physically as big as, weighs close to as many pounds, and he just goes by him like he's standing still. His first step quickness, yeah, certainly at his amount of play in the league. At 5 games, I've never seen anybody. I don't care. Name any defensive tackle who's ever played in the National Football League. Their first 5 games against this kid's first 5 games, Jalen Carter wins. Now, when we start comparing to Aaron Donald and all-time greats and guys who are either in the Hall of Fame or heading to the Hall of Fame, that might be putting a horse before the cart a little bit. But if you're just talking a comp of what one player was at this stage of his career as to the exact same stage of the career of Jalen Carter, Carter's just better. He has had as dominant a first 5 games in the National Football League at the defensive tackle position as anybody I've ever seen him in my entire 50-plus years of watching football.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at PFF, just put this up this morning, a PFF grade, number 1 amongst rookie defenders, sacks, number 1, pressures, number 1, win rate, pressure rate, number 1. I mean, and you bring up his quickness. I think it was Lane. I think it was Lane who compared him to Geno Atkins, who's an all-pro, 4-time all-pro in Cincinnati, for people who don't remember him. Great player. But Geno was really undersized, you know, more in the mold of a John Randall, who I got to cover. Very undersized. So you could understand, yeah, he was amazingly quick. This guy's quick and he's huge and he's stronger than everybody. That's that usually – you got to get in the NFL. You got to get in an NFL weight room. They always say, you know, old man strength. You know, some of these guys. Another former Bengal, if you remember Justin Smith, then he went to San Francisco. You might probably the strongest player. You know, he was just ragdoll people. Jalen Carter's stronger than everybody, and he's that quick. It is a combination we haven't seen before, because even Aaron Donald, he's undersized, tremendously undersized. Jalen Carter's not undersized. He's 6'4", 320, and he moves like that. And look, I picked on the Bears, and it's not just the Bears, but I picked on the Bears the most because they had 2 shots at him, and they're a terrible team with a terrible defensive front. So it's magnified. They handed the best defensive front in football, maybe the best defensive tackle in football. I'll never get it. I can be around for 50 more years, Jody, which I probably won't be, but And I'll never get it. I'll never get it.
And to Howie's credit, he went up and got him. Don't forget, the Eagles moved up one pick to get him. Something between you and me, Howie, you probably didn't have to. The Bears weren't going to take him anyway. Yeah. If they thought he was that good and they could get past his off-field stuff, they would have taken him earlier than that. So he was so much. It just tells you how, because a lot of times after the fact, oh, the Eagles must have loved him. They did. You don't really know. We're not in the war room. We're not in the scouting meetings at a time what their actual grade was and how motivated they were. That proves it. When you move up from number 10 to number 9, just in case, because you've got the fear of maybe somebody else jumping in and trading with the Bears and giving them more, but the Bears dropping back a little more. I wasn't taking any chances. He loved the kid. He wanted the kid. He had to have the kid. He went and got the kid and paid a price that he may not have needed to pay. Oh, it's well worth it now that we get a chance to see Jalen.
Oh, and they loved him. I can tell you that 100%. And, I joked about it. This is the biggest Eagles pick of all time. When people were all Bijan. I was like, well, if Carter's there, they're taking Carter. I mean, and I didn't think he would get there. I thought Seattle might take him. Bunch of teams would come to their senses and say, it's not that big of a deal. We'll take it. And look, what's the old expression? Scared money that don't make money. And the reference of that is, it could have blown up. Yes, of course. Anytime you have red flags, but it's a cost benefit. And these teams, man, I mean, and a lot of that, I talk about that all the time, Jody. That's one advantage Howie has over most other general managers. He's got a lot of room to make mistakes. Other guys don't have room to make mistakes. But because they don't have room to make mistakes, they often make mistakes because they're afraid to do things. Chances. Yeah. They're afraid to take any chances.
Right.
And they end up worse for it.
All right. So let me ask you one more Jalen Carter question, and then we'll move on to something else. He played 71% of the snaps, easily his most so far this year. And we knew it was going to tick up because of no Fletcher Cox in the game. So they needed to cover extra snaps, which, oh, by the way, weren't a whole hell of a lot of them in second half because the Eagles were so dominating. It came back that they had less snaps than they usually do on defense. But if you go by percentage, 71% for Carter. Fletcher's going to be back probably this week, at the latest the week after that. Carter has proved that he can play those numbers. It wasn't like he was running on empty in the fourth quarter because they taxed him, they pushed him, they gave him a little bit more on his plate. He ate it and he gobbled it all up. Is he still going to be a 70% snap guy going forward? Because he just... How do you take a guy who's dominating, snap in and snap out off the field the way he is?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on, in close games, he's going to be on the field late. So, the Eagles tend to have things well in hand. At some point,
that makes sense.
Yeah, I expect, them to be in a tough game at some point. And then, he's going to be on the field, and then it'll spike those weeks. It's always going to be a rotational position. Yeah, if they're up 2 touchdowns, they're not going to play him as much. So, and like you said, the 70% ranking, probably not going to hit that number too many times for that reason. Plus, also, if you're out there for more plays, you're only out there for 56 defensive plays, I think, then, the total number of 39 becomes more important. That's not outrageous. If you're out there for 80 snaps and then you're at 70%, then you're probably pushing it. So a couple reasons, but the percentage is probably not going to be that high too much, but the snap numbers might be up if they're in a close game and they're on the field more. And it should be, and it should keep going up incrementally, but they're lucky enough to have tremendous depth. I mean, Milton Williams stepped in and played well. And he was the other big part of it because he was going to get a few more snaps, and he ended up with 33. But he played well. Kentavious Street was up only 16, but that's more. And he's an NFL player, and he proved that. We even got to see Moro Ajomo for a handful of snaps, making his NFL debut. They're incredibly deep. And remember, they didn't have Marlin as well, not only Fletcher. So that's the deepest position on the team.
Yep.
And they utilized it, and they should. They should.
And we certainly bring them down to defensive tackle. Even we break down defensive tackles because Jordan Davis plays a specific position on the defensive front. It's not exactly the same as the other defensive tackles, so you can get really in the weeds as to who plays what position and how many snaps and everything else. One more defensive line snap question. Why is Derek Barnett still playing snaps for this team? I'm sorry.
Like it.
I know.
By the way,
piling on, but he continues to play week in and week out. And no, I'm not breaking down the all-22 film afterwards and sticking a grade on him like Pro Football Focus is. He does nothing. He just accomplishes nothing when he's on the field. Is it just so to not get Hassan Reddick hurt because you don't want him on the field as many snaps as you would have to if you just said, yeah, Derek, you can take the day off?
No, I mean, it's very similar to defensive tackle. They want to come at you in waves, and they think he's at some point I expect Nolan Smith to lap him.
5 games in hasn't happened, John.
No, but you have the luxury of taking it slow. And I think that's a good thing. But yeah, I don't look, the Eagles, I say it all, the Eagles think more of Derek Barnett than you and a lot of the fan base does. Same thing with Quez Watkins. I'm glad that Nick Sirianni, that was literally word for word. Thank you, Nick, of what I've been saying on the show of why Quez Watkins plays. Because, and I'm not, I got it from Nick. So everyone got to see it out of his mouth. So I'm glad he did that. If he ever gets into a Derek Barnett discussion, he'll say similar things. They value him more than the average fan does. But I mean, Nolan Smith, I would like to see pass him. Because he's not going to be here next year. I know we said that in the past, but this is it. This is it. And it's the fourth defensive end. That's why this team's really good. When we're nitpicking the fourth defensive end, they might be able to get a little bit better if they get Nolan Smith up to speed.
So you're saying you believe this is Derek Barnett's last year as a Philadelphia Eagle, correct?
I do. I do believe.
I'll make a wager with you on another one. This is Quez Watkins last year.
I believe that as well.
Eagles as well.
I believe that as well.
So if both of these guys are halfway out the door, I'm sorry, it just doesn't add up to me. You and Nick can stand together and sing Kumbaya and hold hands.
Well, I'm not
Quez
standing
Watkins
together.
I'm of time.
I'm referencing,
and you said, you're right. You said right here with me last week, and Nick said it again. I think you're both off your rocker. The threat that is Quez Watkins. What threat? What threat is he? Because he ran a certain time at the combine 3.5 years ago? At some point, doesn't the National Football League, I'm going to give credit to the other 31 teams here in the league and go, they're going to look at Quez on film at what he's done this year, last year, and every year you move backwards, it becomes less and less important in the evaluation and go, we're running scared of this guy? This is the guy we're going to shift our defense to? AJ's going to get more open because Quez is on the field in the slot? Are you kidding me? You can say that with a straight face, Nick Sirianni? Come on.
I mean,
you know what reminds me of? In the case of running back,
in the case of Quez, he ran whatever 4.32 3 years ago. He still runs that fast, Jody. It's not like he's lost speed. Again, in a league full of fast guys, he's a fast guy. He's fast to them. So, I mean, he said it succinctly, and if people don't want to listen to him, that's fine.
Oh, we
But
can listen. We just blatantly disagree.
no,
I
but
don't have to take his word as gospel because he's the head coach of the Philadelphia
no,
Eagles.
I didn't say you did. Look, there's what he said, and he says it consistently. So, and I'm trying to pull up the quote. There's a lot of things that happen that maybe it's a slant that AJ catches where Quez clears the middle to make it a cleaner throw. So that's the point. That's the point I've been trying to say. That when you have these routes, everybody has a design, and you can't just say, "Oh, Quez Watkins stinks, so I'm not gonna pay attention to him." And because he's able to stretch the field, it makes it a cleaner throw for the quarterback than if 4-6 guys in there, or Olamide Zaccheaus is out there. He doesn't have that ability to create the same spacing. So it's something that doesn't show up. Similar thing in a different way with Zach Pascal that people seem to identify with more now because they see the struggles. Look, it's boring. What's Zach Pascal? We said, what does Zach Pascal give me? Well, he doesn't give you much as a receiver, but as a guy who does the dirty work, yeah, you'd like to have him back. They would like to have him back. They don't have that trade anymore. I don't. People tend to not call speed dirty work, but when you don't have it, it condenses the field and it makes it more difficult for the quarterback. I mean,
I know the coach was there because he was on the sidelines. He was coaching the team, but maybe he didn't see the stat sheet afterwards. Somehow, AJ Brown was able to catch 175 yards worth of passes last week against the Commanders without Quez on the field. How did he do that? Without the threat of Quez being able to get deep and stretch the defense, somehow AJ on those slants was able to come up with 175 yards worth of catches and 3 touchdowns. I don't know how he did it because
I can tell you how he did it
without the speed and the threat that is Quez Watkins. I'd be shaking in my boots if I were.
You're too much. You're too much. Here. I'm going to put this up. You're too much of a box score guy, Jody. I can tell you why. Emmanuel Forbes was an abject disaster in Washington, and he couldn't hold up on fade routes one-on-one. So it didn't matter. You could take the other 10 people off the field. It could have been one-on-one Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Emmanuel Forbes. That's a Washington Commanders problem. Everything is not the same from game to game. Look, this is a team. I'm not saying they're always right. This is a team that came into the season. Saying Kenny Gainwell's our best running back. And then Kenny Gainwell got hurt after a pedestrian performance in Foxborough, and they had to play DeAndre Swift, and it was proven that DeAndre Swift was better. I'm not saying they're always right, but they came back and they said, all right, Olamide got to play. Olamide made some plays, and whatever the rep count was, their decision was 53-8, or I have to look it up. Quez was at 52. Olamide was at 9.
Olamide was 11%.
Yeah.
Quez was
I was looking at PFF.
6 times more than Olamide was.
Yeah,
which I think is ridiculous.
And they did it for that reason. He explained it in clear and defining terms. They're doing it not for the box score. They're doing it to make things easier for the quarterback to get the football to the real playmakers. And not that they can't accomplish it with Olamide, but it makes it easier. At least they think that. Now, if he keeps...
And I think they're wrong. Plain and simple. I just disagree. I understand when Nick explains it. I understand when you explain it. I contemplate it myself. I don't agree. I just think they're wrong. I don't think the threat that is Quez Watkins helps near as much as either you and or more importantly Nick Sirianni think. It just there's not other than the way they think about it. I'd like a little evidence to be able to,
Well,
and they
there
break
is
down
no
game film,
evidence.
which I don't
There is
do.
no evidence to an intangible
Right.
unless you're watching the tape and you're watching him manipulate the spacing. There is no. That's the point. And he even said the word stat sheet. It doesn't show up in the stat sheet with Quez. He even said that. That's not me. That's Nick's direct quote.
Right.
What can't ever show up on a stat sheet with Quez is his ability to stretch the field. His speed is real. That's a direct quote. And when he does leave, and I do think this will be his last season, I do think it's because it's his fourth year, his final year in his rookie deal, and he'll probably get a better deal elsewhere. They will find another 4-3 guy to do the same thing. I don't know who it's going to be, but it's not. They don't want with AJ and Devontae, as long as they're here, and Dallas, they don't want a 4-6 guy. They want somebody to manipulate the spacing to make things easier for those guys. And it's an intangible. It's never going to show up on a stat sheet.
All right. And
never.
If Nick Sirianni were here with us, I would ask him, but he's not. So I'm going to ask you instead. Who's the other 4-3 slot receiver in the league that this is working wonders for? That their threat of speed is their third guy who they play in the slot.
They don't play, but number one, they don't play him in the slot. AJ moves in the slot. Devontae moves. People get, he's the third receiver. He plays in the slot, but they manipulate and they move people around. And guys, they do slot fades with Devontae and AJ, and they do different things to get those guys open. That's the whole point. They're trying to get those guys open. Intangibles are intangibles. And part of the thing about Jalen Hurts, people say as a great thing because he's a superstar player, but you still hear the people, well, he's only got 22 touchdowns last year, whatever it was. Oh, how could he be in the MVP race with 20? He's got an intangible nature that people cannot, not all people, some people cannot grasp, which turns into 22 wins out of 23. But I know I'm not trying to compare the two as players. I'm just trying to compare the intangibles for people that need something black and white, a number. There are certain guys that are never going to be impressive to them, and those are role players. And you need role players. Not in the case of Jalen.
Right, Jalen's much more than a role player.
In the case of, I shouldn't have brought up Jalen. I should have just kept with Zach Pascal. I was just because some people criticize Jalen for his lack of stats. But Zach Pascal would be the better comparison in a different, because his intangibles are different. But intangibles are intangibles. And when it comes to role players, yeah, I mean, they had a chance. I mean, Alameda played okay when Quez was hurt, and they went right back to Quez. And, if he keeps doing dumb stuff and his chances to catch the football, like, he had an easy first down. He tried to kick it outside on that stupid bubble screen. Maybe Alameda will get in the equation, but I doubt it, man, because they want that speed.
Let me ask you this question, John. I know we got to take our first break. We're going along here. Kenny Gainwell was the number one back coming out of camp, right? They decided, had the competition. We trust he's been here longer. We're still learning about DeAndre Swift. But Kenny Gainwell got the most carries week one. DeAndre Swift got 1. Then Kenny misses game number 2, and DeAndre Swift goes in and does what he does. They didn't go back to, we've made our decision. Kenny Gainwell is our guy. We're going back to him immediately. No, they saw the evidence of what transpired, and they said, all right, maybe we need to adjust. And that's my point here on Quez Watkins this week. Alameda produced more. I'm not talking about threats here. I'm not talking about perceived what he does by doing certain things, running certain routes, that he gets other people open, blatantly overstated by the coach. I'm just talking about what happened. And Alameda produced more than Quez did. As soon as Quez was ready, he gets back to getting 66% of the stat, and Alameda gets 11. They prove that they're willing to put their overall evaluation through a camp aside if there's evidence to the contrary on the field. Why'd they do it a running back and not a wide receiver?
Well, the positions are different. Running backs, more of a lead role. In the case of wide receiver 3, you're the third wide receiver. So again, they're trying. His role is more clearly defined. I'm trying to make AJ and Devontae and Dallas. I'll throw him in there as well. Trying to make things easier for those guys. Whereas the lead back's got to make some plays. That's number one. But I brought up DeAndre Swift and Kenny Gainwell for a reason. It's not like the coaching staff is saying, we picked Quez. They already proved they could shift if they want to shift. They don't want to shift. And they don't want to shift for a reason. And they gave you the reason. And that's the reason, because they think, and you said perceived. To them, it's not perceived. To them, it's real. Now, maybe they're wrong, but that's what they believe. And this coaching staff, to be quite honest, deserves the benefit of the doubt, I think, at this point. And that's what they believe. And again, they've been successful with Olamide. They've been successful with Quez. They've been successful with insert name. And it has more to do with Jalen and AJ and Devontae and Dallas and that offensive line. So when you start getting in the weeds with role players, it's less important. I wouldn't call the lead back, even though it's a devalued position. I wouldn't call that a role player. So it's more important to get that right. And if you see a different trait, because they're getting the football, with the third wide receiver, they're not getting the football, or in a very limited fashion, very limited traffic. So if that's what they want on the field, that's what they want on the field. And like I said, that if Zach Pascal was back, you'd probably have a little bit more success on these bubble screens, but you don't have them. So role players they're never going to be stat guys. And either is Olamide if he plays. He had 2 catches, big catches. What game was that? Everything runs together for me. But I think Olamide's better as a receiver. And if somebody got hurt, I'd rather have Olamide in there than Quez. But for their specific role of what they want, yeah, I get why they want Quez on the field.
Yeah, I don't. And if you're going to coach up, and Nick says this all the time, we have to win every snap. We must win every snap. That's what this is all about. Narrow focus, win the snap, win the day. Don't look ahead. We can say the same thing about position. Even if your wide receiver 3 is your 11th most important player on the field on any given offensive snap. You get your 5 offensive linemen, your quarterback, your 2 wide receiver, your tight end. All of a sudden, who's left standing? Wide receiver 3. So, yeah, he's the 11th most important guy on an offensive snap. That's your job, is to get the most out of your 11th most important guy on every single snap. I know it's real.
They do. Now I'm getting, do I work for the team on the boy, that pisses me off. I wish this team stunk so I could rip them to high hell. I can't rip them to high hell because they're really good. I find fans very interesting because they either think I hate this team or I love this team. What I'm telling you is what Nick Sirianni believes. And for this week, he actually said it himself. He said the same stinking thing. It's not from me. I've been saying that. It's him. That's what he wants.
But John, you're saying you believe it too. You agree with him. Do you agree with Nick Sirianni that he is putting forth this perception? And yeah, it's the word I use, and I'll stand by it. A perception of Quez Watkins, because whether he is or isn't a stat guy, whether I pick up a stat sheet or not, I'd like to have some some proof that I can wrap my head around other than this is what we think happens when Quez does something on a play when he actually does nothing.
So if the head coach of the football team, who's an offensive guy, says this is what he provides, why is he lying about that?
I don't think he's lying. I just think he's wrong. Hold on. Do you really believe that Nick Sirianni never gets anything wrong?
No, he gets a lot of stuff
Well,
wrong.
then that's all we're doing. I don't think I'm not accusing him of lying. I'm accusing him of being wrong. And Nick Sirianni gets stuff wrong. He gets much more right than he does wrong. But when you get some wrong, and I think you get some wrong, I'm going to point out that I think you got it wrong, Coach.
No, that's fine. But before you were saying, that's my point. Why would he do something he doesn't want to do? He can do whatever the hell he wants for the most part when it comes on the field. So he could bench Quez tomorrow. Maybe he does in 2 weeks if he keeps doing these stupid things. He already benched Kenny Gainwell for DeAndre Swift. That's why I brought it up. He's willing to make these moves when he sees that he's made a mistake or he's made a misevaluation or he's made this, and maybe it happens. But for this particular team at wide receiver 3, that's where the comp of Swift and Gainwell loses and goes off track. For wide receiver 3, again, if AJ gets hurt, which you don't want to happen, if Devontae gets hurt, which you don't want to happen, it becomes a different conversation because then you need actual production. Then you need actual production from a receiver. And if it were me, I would go with Olamide. I think he's a better receiver. In that instance, if you need somebody to catch the football with traffic, and believe me, I get it. People say receiver, and they used to say it with Riley Cooper back in the day. When you talk about blocking, same thing with Zach Pascal. When you're talking about blocking for a receiver, that's not a good thing. First, yes, if it's a guy you're counting on, if it's your fourth receiver and his role is to block, it's not a bad thing. If it's your third receiver and his role is to make things easier for the top 3, and I'm talking about Dallas as well, again, it's not a bad thing. If he's got to produce, it's a bad thing.
Understood. And yes, you can actually break down game film and you can see where blocking can. On the given play that you design where you need blocking from a wide receiver, gets the job done. That to me, you can come up with evidence that, wow, this guy's doing a job. It's not the most important job on the field, but we have a job for him and he's doing it real well. I don't see that with Quez. All I see is he runs fast. And they think that he brings coverage with him when he goes. And I just don't believe
that's easy to see for the coaches. I mean, that is easy to see. I mean, if a guy's not paying attention, and by the way, they can't do that, Jody. They can't just let him run through the field. They can't. They get fired. You could say, well, you're going to throw a 60-yard bomb to Quez and he's going to drop it. Well, he's got the 90-yard play. He's got the long touchdown against Minnesota. He's got a couple long touchdowns. Yeah. I mean, you as a head coach or a defensive coordinator of the opposition, whether it's Olamide, well, whatever the name is, you can't let any NFL receiver run behind you.
Understood. But my point is that if Olamide runs that same route and he runs it 1/10 of a second slower than Quez, is that really giving the safety the chance to cheat in and get up and take the slant away from A.J. Brown? I don't think so. And if and when the safety does get sloppy and lets him get behind him, yeah, I'm going to take Olamide catching the ball over Quez every day of the week.
Well, Tyreek Hill is the fastest, is the most productive fast receiver in the history of football. In my estimation, because usually really fast guys, are not the best when it comes to route running, hands. He's managed to put it all together, and he's a special player. But yeah, there is a huge difference between a 4.32 guy and a 4.6 guy in the NFL. A huge when it comes to speed. That is,
Olamide's not 4.6.
Olamide's Yeah, he ran 4.59. He's 4.6. I mean, that's what he is.
Quez
There's a
ran
lot
what?
of guys. 4.32, Quez.
Okay, so we're talking about 2/10.
I mean,
2/10
if
less
you
than
don't think
3/10
that's
of a second.
huge, if you don't think that's huge in the NFL, I can't help you. That is in real time. That is enormous in the NFL. Enormous, an enormous difference. Enormous.
Right, but again, we're now 4 years removed from the time that Quez ran that time at the combine.
So now we're saying he's slow.
No,
Now
I'm
we're
not saying
he's
he's slow, John. I'm just not going to revert to a time they ran 4 years ago in shorts in Indianapolis. To me,
He might be faster because he's been.
He might, and he might not catch the ball as well as he used to either. At least that's what I'm seeing.
Well, I don't think he's ever caught the ball well.
He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. We are Birds 365. Ricky Ricardo, voice of the Eagles in Espanol, is going to join us. Come up in a couple. Stick around.